Welcome back to part 2. In this video, we're going to connect the V-neck and finish the body. Does the number of stitches on the front panel and then the back equal? Then we can divide our sleeves and connect the V-neck. Now make sure you are on the right side of your work, so the outside of the sweater, and we're going to work our way the same way we've been doing with the ribbing. Continue the ribbing pattern until you meet your first marker. Take out that magic marker and then knit the raglan stitch. Take out the next marker, and now we're going to divide the sleeves out. To divide the sleeve stitches, you would need another yarn. It could be the same one that you're using or another yarn extra that you have. Cut the yarn so that there's enough room for your arm to go through comfortably. This will help as you try this piece on as you're working on the body. Now thread the yarn through a needle. I'm using a plastic needle that I got as part of a kit when I bought my markers. Now what you're going to do is thread all the stitches, the sleeve stitches, onto this yarn using the needle. This is going to help separate the sleeve stitches from the body as you're working on the body, and then you can go back to the sleeve later. You can use a yarn stitch holder that looks like a giant clothing pin, but I prefer using the yarn, and I really recommend it because the yarn allows you to try on the piece as you're working on the body so that you can tell how long you want it, how it fits on your body without having to just guess the work. Once you come to the next stitch marker, you're going to stop putting the stitches onto the yarn and tie the yarn together with enough space, as I said, so that your arm can go through it. And you can see here that I'm making mine very, very loose. With the sleeves divided out, we're going to add more stitches using a backward loop cast on. This is going to help make your armpit area more comfortable when you actually wear this sweater. So using this method, let's cast on 5 stitches. Now we're going to continue knitting on the other side using the ribbing pattern as we've been doing on the body. And you can check whether you need to do a knit, purl, or a purl, knit when you start by checking the previous rows. Here, I need to do a knit, purl after the raglan stitch. So I'm purling my raglan stitch because the next stitch has to be a knit stitch. I take out the marker and then I knit, purl, knit, purl, continuing the ribbing pattern that I've been doing. We will again stop at the marker for the sleeves. Take out that first marker and purl or knit the raglan stitch based on the knitting pattern that you're doing. And then the same as before, we're going to divide the sleeves using a spare yarn using a needle. Once you have all the sleeve stitches on the yarn, tie off the yarn loosely so that you have enough room. Then add 5 stitches using the backwards loop cast on method. And just as we did before, we're going to continue the ribbing pattern on the other side of the sleeve. And knit the last stitch. And this is what your piece should look like. You have 2 sleeves that are divided out, with the V-neck meeting in the middle. Now we're going to connect the V-neck and start working in the round instead of going back and forth. Make sure that the string yarn is on the right needle, and we're simply going to continue knitting. So knit that first stitch on that other side of the front piece, and then put a marker in it to indicate a starting of a new row. And then we're going to knit the entire row because we just did a ribbing pattern for the previous row. For the last two stitches, we're going to stitch them together, combining them into one stitch because these two stitches are the neckline stitches where we only did knitting stitches. Do the ribbing pattern for the next row. If you start with a purl stitch, make sure you end with a knit stitch. If you start with a knit stitch, make sure you end with a purl stitch on the end. As you can see, I start with a purl stitch and then I end with a knit stitch. Now all you have to do is repeat the knitting stitch rows and the ribbing stitch rows to continue that broken rib pattern until you reach the length you like. Try on the sweater to see what length you like. And then the next section would be the ribbing stitches. I'm going to make my ribbing pattern with a side slit. So I'm going to continue knitting this row until I get to that side section where I want to start my ribbing end. And that end is going to be the middle of the armpit section that we added. So this is the middle of the sweater on the side. And I'm going to knit until I get to that middle section. Right there. Once I get to that part where I want to start my ribbing edge, I'm going to switch my needle to 4 millimeters. So this is one size down from the needle that I'm using for the body. So then I'm going to first add a stitch. And just knit away. Knit stitch until I get to the other side of the sweater, the other armpit, and to the middle section of it. Once I get there, I'm going to also add another stitch. Okay, let's turn the work around so you should be facing the inside of your sweater. In order to create a neat edge, we're going to slip the first stitch and then start the ribbing pattern, starting with a knitting stitch and then purl. Make sure you're using the right size needle. For me, I'm using a 4 millimeter. Continue this ribbing pattern until you come to the edge of this row. So this is half of that sweater. When you have 2 stitches left, knit the second to last stitch and slip the last stitch purlwise. Then flip the work around, making sure that you're working with the right size needle. Knit the first stitch, slip the second stitch purl wide, and then knit the third stitch. Continue the ribbing pattern normally. When you have 2 stitches left, slip the second to last stitch purlwise and then knit the last stitch. Then turn the work around. So this is your third ribbing row. Slip the first stitch, so this is on the wrong side. Knit the second stitch. Purl the next stitch, continuing the ribbing pattern normally. So knit, purl, knit, purl. Again, this is on third row, wrong side. You're going to knit the second to last stitch and slip the last stitch. Flip the work around for row 4. This is on the right side, so outside of your sweater. Knit the first stitch, slip the second stitch purlwise, and then continue the ribbing pattern, knit, purl, knit, purl. So repeat these steps until you reach the length that you like. For me, it was 2 inches. Once you reach the length that you want, we're going to cast off. You're going to knit the first stitch and then purl the second one. Then pull over the first stitch over the second stitch. And then we're going to knit the next one, pull over the first stitch over the second stitch, and continue. So wherever you purl stitched before, you were going to do a purl stitch. Wherever you did a knitting stitch, you're going to do a knitting stitch. And continue pulling over the stitches as you go. So make sure you have 2 stitches on the right needle and then pull over so that you have one stitch on the right needle, and then do either a knitting stitch or a purl stitch. So continue this pattern until the end. So when you have 1 stitch left on the right needle and 1 stitch left on the left needle, you're going to knit that last stitch and then pull over the first stitch over the second one or the last one and pull out some of the yarn and then cut it at the end and pull it out completely. And this finishes one side of the ribbing. Now let's work on the other side of the ribbing, or the other half, and finish it off. So you might have a cable like I have, or the original needle cable in this side. So what you're going to do is grab the needle that you were using for the ribbing part. So for me, it's a 4mm. You don't have to switch it out like me if you just have that original needle in there. Just make sure that your needle on your right hand is that new needle that you want to use. And we're going to start using this new yarn to start the ribbing. And when you're starting with the new yarn, make sure you're working with the long tail as you would normally. Just as we did before, we're going to add a stitch in the beginning. Then knit the entire row and add another additional stitch at the end, and then turn the work around. Make sure you're facing the wrong sides, the inside of the sweater where you see the bumpiness. And we're going to repeat the same thing that we did on the other ribbing part that we already finished. For row 1, whenever you're working from the inside of the sweater, you're going to slip the first stitch purlwise and then knit the next stitch and continue ribbing pattern normally until at the end, second to last stitch is a knit stitch, and the last stitch you will slip it. And then every time you're on the right side, so when you're looking at the outside of the sweater, you're going to knit the first stitch, slip the second stitch purlwise, and then do the knitting pattern normally, starting with knit, purl, and then the second to last stitch will be a slip stitch, and then the last stitch you will knit it. And continue repeating this for every row. Once you reach the length that you want, for me it was 2 inches, cast off the stitches just like we did before for the other side of the ribbing. Now we're done with our body, so we are ready to move on to the sleeves and then the neck next. Come back for part 3 for those instructions.